Hello everyone and welcome to the DP Design Professionals YouTube channel. In this video I will be talking about what to study for the California Supplemental Exam. Getting right into it, this is an overview of my experience. I was able to pass the CSE in November of 2019. I studied for about 1 to 1.5 months. So didn't spend too much time studying and I passed on my first try. This test is very different from the NCARB AREs, so that was a kind of interesting, difficult thing to get used to. So I know a lot of people who did not pass on their first try just because the way that information is presented and the way the test is structured is very different. So don't be discouraged by that, but know that you can pass this exam in relatively little time. So hopping right into what to study for this exam, the two main resources I used for studying was the Archibal WU study guide and the Doucette study guide. The WU study guide was a great one to go through. It has a lot of great content in it. It also has a great mock exam, and I personally thought that the mock exams in the WU study guide were a bit harder than the actual CSE exam. It sometimes goes too much into the details. For the Doucette study guide, it's otherwise known as the whole enchilada. And this one also has a mock exam, and I thought that the mock exam in this study guide was actually easier than the CSE itself. This also comes with audio, which I think is very helpful. The audio goes sometimes a little bit more in depth than what is in the actual printed study guide, so I recommend listening to both the audio and reading through the exam material. And you can also do this at the same time because the audio and the exam study guide covers the similar categories. It's also great for the audio. You can listen to this on the go while you're commuting, doing errands, cleaning the house, and things like that. So I definitely recommend using both of the study guides, and for the Doucette whole enchilada, using both the printed material and the audio. Next up, we have the AIA contracts. These are some of the contracts you will need to know and understand to pass the California Supplemental Exam. The two primary contracts are the A201, which is the general conditions of the contract, and the B101, standard form of agreement between owner and architect. For the B101, there is a 2007 version, which you can see a screenshot of it on the right, and it comes with commentary. I use this for a lot of my studying because it breaks down each of the sections of the contract and makes it, it kind of explains and breaks down what's going on in each one and makes it a little bit easier to understand. If you have never looked at these contracts before, or you need a major refresher because it has been so long or it's been a while since you've taken the AREs and you want to get a little bit more in depth and really understand them, the best resource that I have to recommend would be the Schiff Hardin lectures, and I'll link them down below. The Schiff Hardin lectures really go into depth on the contracts. The guy who gives the lectures is a law professor that specializes in the architecture industry, and so he really understands the AIA contracts really well. He gives a lot of examples and breaks down each of the categories in the contract one by one. He does not have lectures for all of the contracts, all of the AIA contracts, but he does have lectures for some of the most important ones. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. And if you have, I suggest listening through it Once again, if it's been a while since you reviewed these contracts from the AREs, I would say listen to it again. It's a great refresher, and you might want to make sure you're referencing the correct years as well. Make sure you're referencing the most up-to-date AIA contracts. I believe, as of this video, the most current one is from 2017. Next up, we have Code and ADA. This exam does cover these materials. Because we are in California, obviously you will want to know California specific code, but for the more general stuff, you will want to reference the Building Code Illustrated, and this resource I have recommended before for some of the AREs, and it's a great way to understand the code and how it's broken up and just how to read it and make it more understandable because it is illustrated. So if you're not too familiar with building codes, this is a great intro into building code, and then if you are pretty familiar, I would just flip through something like this or the actual California Building Code to get a refresher on kind of how the code is laid out and what kind of information is on there. Some of the things you'll want to pay attention to is common clearances, especially relating to ADA, like your door swings, your door clearances, clearances in front of countertops or under sinks, in restrooms, things like that. Anything that you can think of that is considered one of those like common details or common clearances, I would pay special attention to. Also things like ramps and their slope and their landings, I think would be another good thing to get a quick refresher on. Next up, we have acts and agencies. Acts and agencies is a major topic in this exam, and it's really important to understand the difference between an act and an agency, and the different jurisdictions or I guess levels of control that they have. And one of the best ways I was able to study acts and agencies is to break them up into categories. So I listed some of the categories down here. For example, coast, wetlands, endangered species, air, water, environment, and so on. Basically, my strategy here was to break up the different categories of acts and agencies and then write down the different acts and agencies that applied to each of these categories. And that really helped me and my brain understand kind of which acts and agencies had overlapping scope, and then from there I could figure out which agency was in charge of what and then which acts covered which topics. So that was a really great way to make all of these acts and agencies more understandable. Instead of having just a list of all of them in one place, just break them down into smaller pieces. And that really made it a lot easier. The next thing I would do is to break them down in terms of range or scope. So figure out which ones are federal, which ones are state, which ones are regional, and which ones are local. So that also helps you figure out in a question that you may be asked who has control or who has jurisdiction over a certain issue. If the question is asking for a federal agency, then you can immediately cross out some of your options. Same thing goes for any of the other ranges or scopes, really understanding which of those agencies or acts have what kind of range. So understanding that it will really help you figure out the best answer for some of those questions. And this is a chart that I was able to find online. It breaks down the California state government and the executive branches, and then which agencies fall under which categories, which jurisdictions, and things like that. I know it's very, very small, so I'm going to put the link down below. It is publicly accessible. It's free. It's a free document. You won't need to know everything on this chart, but based on your studying of the Woo and whole enchilada, you will kind of have an idea of which agencies to pay attention to. So again, the link will be down below so you can look at this a little bit more in depth and just get a better idea of which agencies fall under which categories. A couple other resources that I would like to recommend would be the Ventura Wetland Permitting Guide, and I would pay special attention to the diagrams in here. If I remember correctly, the permitting guide is a pretty hefty document, but it does have a lot of great diagrams, descriptions, and explanations, so definitely take a look at that. It's going to be super, super helpful. The other resource I would like to recommend is FEMA 454, which is designing for earthquakes. This also not completely necessary, but if you are not familiar with things like reentrant corners, soft stories, and general earthquake design, this is a great document to get acquainted with the various design challenges that come with designing for earthquakes. And some of the terminology associated with it. And I think you'll definitely be encountering some earthquake-related terminology, so understanding that and how it relates to design and kind of the design failures of the past are good to know. So definitely check out FEMA 454. I will place the link for both of these documents down below in the description. And then the last one is California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. So understanding this CEQA process, I think, is also super important for this exam. I believe in the Doucette study guide, there is a chart that kind of breaks down the process of CEQA, and I would definitely recommend studying that and understanding that process, because it is kind of complex and it is pretty easy to get confused on that. I personally memorized this process or the chart that's provided in that study guide, and I was able to just like write it down all on a sheet of paper. And for me personally, that was the best way to really understand and figure out what that process was all about. So definitely take a look at these 3 documents. They will be great resources for you. So a little recap of the study references and guides I recommended. The Woo and Doucette study guides are going to be your #1 place to study. I would study those first and then move on to the other reference materials such as AIA Contracts, Building Code, Acts and Agencies, Ventura Wetland Permitting Guide, FEMA 454, and the CEQA process. And one of my favorite resources to study just general content was through Quizlet. It's a free app that you can use on your phone or on the web, and it's essentially flashcards. So a lot of people out there have obviously studied for this exam before, and they have made flashcards on the Quizlet app and made them publicly available. So you can go onto the app, search in California Supplemental Exam, and a whole bunch of study sets will show up for you to study from. So I personally would download just one study set that I thought was the best or maybe most comprehensive, and I would study the flashcards on my commute, on the train, or on the couch if I didn't want to sit at a computer or a desk and study. This was one of my favorite resources to study and really get familiar with the content in a different format. So my sample study schedule is below. This is very, very close to my actual study schedule that I used in order to pass this exam. So I took roughly a month, a little bit more than that, to study. In week 1, I focused on the Woo study guide, giving myself kind of homework assignments along the way. Then I moved on to the whole enchilada or Doucette study guide, studying per category each day. and then also throwing in some question and answer throughout the study time. I would also recommend listening to the audio while doing the study guide, because the audio goes a little bit more in depth than some of the written content, and I've said that before and I'll say it again. I know that some people have listened to the audio over and over and over again, where they're getting tired of his voice, which you probably are with my voice at this point if you've listened to all my videos, but I promise you that audio will be very helpful, and I definitely thought of his voice during the exam, and I was like, oh, I remember him saying XYZ, so the answer must be this. So it might be annoying, but trust me on this, you will for sure find it useful. And if you think it's taking up too much time, or if you've already gone through it once, I would recommend listening to it on 1.5 or 2 times speed, just so you can get through it faster, but still continue to learn content. Then in week 3, I would review the contracts. So AIA contracts would be in this week. Also reviewing things like code would be a good one in this week if maybe you're already pretty familiar with the contracts. This week I would also squeeze in a practice test or some practice questions. Week 4, I would review acts and agencies. Again, this is something you really need to understand, the difference between all of the different acts and agencies, and really the difference between an act and an agency, because those are two very different things. Again, another practice test in week 4, and then in week 5, I would review everything. And I would take the results from my practice test in the previous week to kind of gauge how I did and to see which categories I maybe need more help brushing up on. And I would focus on those categories in that last week. Typically the weekend before the exam, or even the week before, I would just be memorizing all of the things I knew I needed to memorize. So for me, that was writing down lists of all the acts and agencies, so I could be sure I knew which acts and agencies fell under which kind of category. And then things like the CEQA process, I would be writing down over and over and over again until I really had that memorized. And then for any of my exams, I would usually take them on a Monday, just so I could have the 2 days prior just really focusing on the exam and getting my brain and mind and body into the test-taking mindset. That was my personal choice, and that worked out best for me. I know other people have different strategies for that, so just do whatever is best for you. I think this timeline was pretty comfortable at times and pretty tight at times. I would say week 1 and week 2, we really had to keep on top of our timeline and our homework assignments because it was going through a lot of content. But if you needed to, you could take some time throughout the other weeks to kind of catch up on that material. But yes, I think it's definitely doable to do it in this timeline, but it also depends on kind of what other work, school, life, other things you have going on and your other responsibilities. At this time, I was working 40 hours a week. I was going to social events, going to the gym, things like that. I don't have a family or anything, so I don't have other outside responsibilities. So my time after work was really dedicated to gym and studying, or just socializing and hanging out with friends and stuff like that. So adjust as you feel necessary based on what's going on in your life. But I think overall this is a pretty good study schedule. And last but not least, our dog of the day. So this is probably our most special dog of the day, and I'm extremely biased, but our dog of the day for this video is Luka. And so Luka is actually my rescue pup. I rescued him not too long ago in June of 2021, and I absolutely adore him. I've wanted a dog literally since I was born, and I was finally able to adopt one this year, and I'm so excited. He is a little goofball. He hates getting wet. He does not know how to cuddle, and I am currently in process of teaching him how to cuddle. It's been a struggle so far, but I'm hoping we can get there. He absolutely hates squirrels and cats, and he is named after my favorite basketball player, Luka Doncic of the Dallas Mavericks. Luka, my dog, is very athletic but very uncoordinated. He doesn't quite know how to catch a ball in midair or treats or really anything for that matter, but I'm hoping if we work on it and keep practicing, he'll get there. And he is famous for his signature sploot, which you can see down below here. And if you want to see more pictures of him, you can follow him on Instagram at LukaBoo. And if you would like to submit your dog or pet to the Dog of the Day, please feel free to email me your pictures and fun facts at dp.designprof@gmail.com. Thank you so much. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And please leave any comments down below if you have any suggestions for future videos you want to see. If you like this video or if you have any questions, I try to go through the comments pretty frequently to answer those questions that you have or give you any additional study resources that I can think of. So like, comment, and subscribe please. That would really help me out and help me grow this channel to keep making more content for you guys. Thank you so much.